Happy Halloween! In spirit of the season, there's no better time for me, Suggestive Gaming, to go over the story of one of the most suggested series I've ever gotten on this channel, the F.E.A.R trilogy. Initially launching just over 20 years ago, the F.E.A.R series hasn't seen a release since the ill-fated 2014 free-to-play shooter F.E.A.R Online. But that hasn't stopped it from remaining one of the most beloved horror game franchises in modern memory. Before we dive in though, there's a few things to note about the F.E.A.R series that will affect how I cover things. First, the aforementioned F.E.A.R Online has since gone offline and didn't have much of a story anyway, so I'm going to skip over it. Second, and most importantly, after the release of the first F.E.A.R title in 2005, developer Monolith Productions set out to work on the follow-up, F.E.A.R 2 Project Origin, while another team, Timegate Studios, took the helm to release two standalone expansions for the original. These expansions, Extraction Point and Perseus Mandate, were then unceremoniously disregarded by the events of the mainline sequel. As such, they now exist as sort of a what-if or alternate universe style side story. To try to keep things as cohesive as possible, I'll first cover the story of the main F.E.A.R trilogy, weaving in a couple comics and a live-action prequel, before circling back to tackle the alternate route the expansions take. This means that some things that happen concurrently with the story of the first game might be explained a little bit later, just to keep the timelines distinct. Trust me, we'll get through it together. Now, with all of that out of the way, this is what you need to know about F.E.A.R. Our story begins in 1964, when the United States government quietly backs the creation of a private contractor called Armacham Technology Corporation, or ATC. What begins as a company focused on aerospace and medical research quickly grows into one of the most influential players in the Cold War defense industry. While ATC publicly deals in engineering and biotechnical development, behind closed doors, their scientists begin experimenting in more unorthodox fields, such as genetic manipulation, cloning, and perhaps most troubling, psychic enhancement. As the years press on, Armacham's leadership seek to create a new generation of soldiers, ones that don't rely on communication networks or human willpower. Instead, they envision an army that could act as a single organism, guided telepathically by a single mind. This idea would lay the foundation for a series of black projects that would define Armacham's legacy, and eventually, its downfall. In 1973, Armacham begins Project Icarus, a joint venture initially sponsored by NASA to study the effects of the microgravity conditions of outer space on the human body. The project's scope quickly expands into full biological engineering, with scientists developing ways to replace bone and muscle tissue with carbon fiber composites and synthetic ligaments. Instead of testing these new creations on actual human subjects, Armacham develops Replica clones. The first viable Icarus subjects are a success from a mechanical standpoint, but psychologically are left unstable. When the project's funding inevitably dries up, Armacham repurposes the research for more lucrative military applications. These early subjects are contained by ATC, and Project Icarus is eventually swept under the rug. Around this same time, Dr. Harlan Wade, one of Armacham's leading researchers, discovers that his very own infant daughter, Alma Wade, exhibits prodigious psychic abilities. She's taken in by ATC to be studied, and the girl's powers grow exponentially by the time she's 6. Her abilities in telepathy, telekinesis, and psychic projection explode beyond anything the scientists have ever observed. During her confinement, Armacham psychologists conduct a brief series of interviews with Alma to assess her emotional and psychic development. Supervised by a Dr. Green, these sessions start innocently, but as the interviews go on, Dr. Green begins to threaten the girl, forcing Alma's tone to shift. The girl begins to psychically torment Dr. Green, demanding she tell her about mysterious, bandaged men. As the exchange grows more volatile, Dr. Green starts to lose her composure, hallucinating that she's trapped in the very same cell as Alma. The child's voice echoes through the room, taunting her with visions of the men and claiming that they've told her that Dr. Green made them, and that she means to kill her. Armacham, believing that the only way to contain Alma's growing influence is to seal her away, decides to place her into a containment unit known as the Vault on Still Island. From the age of 8, Alma Wade is kept in a medically induced coma while her father, Harlan, helps begin work on a new project, Project Origin. Origin's intended purpose is to solve communications issues in the battlefield for the United States military. Using what they've learned from Alma, ATC finally sees the path to a psychic commander that could control a battalion of their brain-dead cloned Replica soldiers. Believing that his daughter's psychic abilities came from a mutation in her DNA, Harlan determines that she should be impregnated with a genetically engineered male fetus. Harlan hopes that the gestation process will allow Alma's psychic abilities to transfer to her genetic offspring. This reveals the more disturbing nature behind Alma's captivity. Harlan and the others keep Alma subdued in her coma until she's old enough to carry a fetus. At age 15, the first of these fetuses is implanted in Alma, and she carries the baby to term without issue. However, as the doctors induce birth, Alma awakens and realizes that her father is taking her child away from her. Despite her fighting, ATC is able to sedate her, placing her into a coma yet again. The child, however, proves to show no signs of inheriting his mother's psychic abilities. While he's designated a failure by Armacham, the unnamed boy isn't disposed of, but rather observed outside of Project Origin. Harlan and his scientists, meanwhile, impregnate Alma, now 16, with a second prototype fetus. After another successful pregnancy, the second boy is born, and this time Alma doesn't break free of her medically induced coma, although she consciously awakens once again. Unlike the first prototype, this child shows immediate signs of psychic gifts. He's given the name Paxton Fettel and is subsequently contained within the Project Origin facility, never told about his mother or his brother. However, despite never meeting his mother, Fettel grows up seemingly with a strong connection to her. When he reaches the age of 10, Fettel is somehow telepathically contacted by his still comatose mother, in something that's later called a synchronicity event. Feeding off of her negative psychic energy, Paxton is thrown into a violent rage, killing 7 Project Origin personnel during this outburst. While ATC security is able to subdue Fettel using tranquilizers, this synchronicity event spells an end for Project Origin. Realizing that Alma is far too dangerous to keep alive, considering she can't even be contained by unconsciousness, Armacham decides to pull her life support for good. 6 days later, Alma's body dies, but her psychic presence seemingly lingers on. Project Origin is subsequently shut down, and its facility is sealed up, with Paxton Fettel still kept inside. However, Armacham can't deny the promises Fettel offers. Despite Harlan's recommendation not to revive the project, it's effectively relaunched as Project Perseus. Over the next years, ATC develops a psychic link between Paxton Fettel and their Replica soldiers, finally realizing their vision of a telepathically commanded army. This new project's early results are promising, with Fettel being able to command dozens of replicas simultaneously, but the psychic instability left by his connection to Alma proves impossible to contain. Meanwhile, Armacham begins a parallel effort known as Project Paragon, a program intended to locate or cultivate psychic aptitude in ordinary subjects. Beneath Wade Elementary School, researchers administer chemical enhancers and mental conditioning exercises to children, hoping to identify latent potential similar to Alma's. Most of the participants suffer severe psychological trauma, but a handful display promising responses. These candidates are quietly transferred to yet another program, one meant to weaponize their abilities. That initiative becomes Project Harbinger, directed by Armacham President Genevieve Aristide. Harbinger's test subjects are fitted with neural amplifiers and subjected to extreme psychic exposure designed to awaken or replicate Alma's powers. Most die or descend into psychosis, though one soldier, Michael Beckett, survives long enough to show results. His heightened sensitivity to psychic energy makes him invaluable to Aristide's agenda, and Project Harbinger continues in secret under her supervision. In the year 2025, oh hey, look at that. The first prototype of Project Origin, now 30 years old, is assigned to the US Army's First Encounter Assault Recon Unit. This secret unit, called F.E.A.R for short, was established to combat paranormal threats to national security. While the prototype still has no name, a purposeful tactic used to prevent him from establishing his own identity, his new position in the F.E.A.R unit, the Point Man, is what he'll come to be known by. 1 week later, the Point Man's brother, Paxton Fettel, establishes another telepathic link with his mother, Alma Wade, even though she's been dead for years. During this second synchronicity event, she urges him to find her and make those responsible for their suffering suffer in return. As ATC security personnel monitor Fettel's cell, Alma's image flickers across their monitors. Moments later, Fettel's psychic control snaps into action. Replica soldiers across the facility suddenly turn on their handlers, gunning down ATC personnel as Fettel escapes containment. Through a telepathic exchange, Alma shows Fettel flashes of her suffering at Armacham's hands, images of her experimentation and her confinement. Enraged and unaware of her true fate, Fettel vows to find her and kill anyone who stands in his way. He confronts scientists and guards, demanding to know where Alma is being held. And when one refuses, Fettel brutally kills him, declaring that their pain will lead him to the truth. With the Replica forces fully under Fettel's command, he sets out to search for Alma himself. His parting words echo her vengeance, that everyone who hurt her deserves to die. After Paxton Fettel and his Replica soldiers wipe out the entirety of ATC's security forces and escape the Origin facility, the government dispatches the F.E.A.R unit to find him and take him down. Among its ranks is the Point Man, Alma's first child, still unbeknownst to him and his squad mates, and this will be his first assignment. The Point Man joins team members Spencer Jankowski and Jin Sun Quan, with coordinator Rowdy Betters guiding them remotely. They deploy to the Auburn district of the city of Fairport, where F.E.A.R has traced a signal from a tracker in Fettel's head. The group searches a nearby complex where the Point Man begins to experience psychic echoes of Alma's voice and image. The Point Man then gets separated from the others, finding a mutilated dead body and reaching the building's roof before being ambushed and attacked by Fettel. Paxton reveals that the dead man's name was Charles Hebbiger, though he admits that he doesn't know if his memories of the man are his or hers. The Point Man then passes out, and when he awakens, Fettel has vanished. He then overhears Betters over the radio, who explains that Fettel's signal has vanished. As he makes his way out of the complex, 2 helicopters approach, and he finds Jin and Jankowski preparing for exfiltration to their next objective, a situation with the Replica soldiers at the nearby harbor. On the way, the Point Man experiences disjointed memories and visions of Alma's traumatic past, with communications from Fettel, who seemingly has developed a psychic connection with him. When the choppers arrive at their destination, the South River Wastewater Treatment Plant, the F.E.A.R unit meet with U.S. Army Delta Force Sergeant Douglas Holliday, who briefs his own squad. They then lead a combined assault on the wastewater treatment plant, but the vision of Alma suddenly appears and slaughters the Delta Force team. The Point Man is then forced to fight through Replica soldiers on his way to rendezvous with Jankowski. He soon sees Alma appear once again, with fiery explosions arriving in her wake. The Point Man is caught up in the explosion and blasted out of the window of the facility. Later, the Point Man awakens to find a surviving Jin discovering him outside. Betters calls and tells them that he's tracing Fettel's signal to their position. He then sends the Point Man back in alone to find Paxton, while having Jin go search for Jankowski. As the Point Man looks for Fettel, the helicopters are again rerouted, this time to Armacham's headquarters, where something big is apparently going on. It's not long before Alma appears once again before the Point Man, and this time he sees memories of her forced childbirth. Afterward, he continues to fight through the treatment plant, discovering evidence of ATC's interest in a major contamination upstream. He also finds another one of Fettel's victims, Bill Moody, whom the Point Man has visions of Fettel interrogating. Before dying, Moody whispers about Alma and Origin. As the Point Man fights through more Replica forces, they begin to retreat. Believing F.E.A.R to be heading towards Armacham, the Point Man is extracted by helicopter to follow him there. Upon arrival at ATC's headquarters, however, the Point Man's escort is immediately gunned down by Replica forces awaiting them on the rooftop. He infiltrates the skyscraper alone, fighting invisible assassins and discovering, via voicemails, references to projects Perseus and Origin. He soon comes across Norton Mapes, a civilian ATC engineer who tricks him into disabling the local security. After resetting the network hub for betters, the Point Man follows F.E.A.R's psychic trail to the site of a missing Delta Force team. He and Jin, who arrives with a new escort, discover the team has been reduced to liquefied remains, having never been able to fire a single shot. The Point Man continues his pursuit, locating another hostage, Aldous Bishop, who is strapped to explosives. Bishop reveals that he was interrogated by replicas about Harlan Wade and his daughter, not Alma, but Alice, who is on the same ATC task force as him. Sergeant Holliday then arrives with a demolitions expert to try to free Bishop, while the Point Man gets separated while restoring elevator power. Holliday escorts Bishop to the roof, but as they board the evac chopper, he is gunned down by ATC security forces, who were deliberately targeting Bishop. The Point Man then realizes that he now has two enemy forces, the replicas and Armacham's own internal security. He fights his way through ATC forces, only to be repeatedly sabotaged by Norton Mapes, who uses the now unlocked security system to activate automated turrets against the Point Man. Betters confirms that F.E.A.R is now heading for the executive building to find Alice Wade, and the Point Man follows, slipping past infighting between ATC security and Replica soldiers. He soon reaches Alice Wade's office, where he finds a message from her father, Harlan, warning her to flee. He eventually locates Alice herself, hiding in her father's office. She reveals that she knows Harlan's current location, giving them the coordinates to his secret facility, none other than the vault. The Point Man then escorts her to the elevator, but during the ascent, Alma intervenes. The power cuts out, and Alice disappears. The Point Man reaches the roof and finds Alice, just in time to watch as an evac chopper arriving for her is shot down. Alice then panics, believing she's safer on her own, and flees to the parking garage. Despite Better's attempts to convince her otherwise, she escapes in her car, just as Holliday and Jin arrive in a new chopper to extract the Point Man. The team follows Alice's coordinates to the Auburn district, where Betters identifies the location as the Project Origin facility. As they approach, however, their helicopter is shot down. Holliday and Jin are injured in the crash, leaving the Point Man to once again proceed on his own. Fighting through the war-torn streets, he briefly encounters F.E.A.R, who reveals to have captured Alice. F.E.A.R taunts him before vanishing once again, taking the Wade daughter with him. The Point Man continues on, fighting ATC forces led by Mapes, and finally locates the hidden entrance to the Origin facility. Inside the secret complex, he finally finds Mapes frantically destroying evidence. Betters confirms from recovered data that Alma was the psychic genetic reference for the program, kept in a coma and forced to give birth to the prototypes, with F.E.A.R being the second. The Point Man then reaches the main vault, just in time to see Harlan Wade confront Mapes, shoot him, and then seal himself inside of the vault. The wounded Mapes urges the Point Man to reroute power to the door and destroy the facility before Harlan lets her out. The Point Man proceeds to reroute the power and finally enters the vault himself. There, he finds Paxton F.E.A.R, unfortunately kneeling over Alice Wade's mutilated corpse, feeding as Alma watches. F.E.A.R finally reveals that he and the Point Man were born of the same mother, before the Point Man at last kills him, putting an end to the replica threat, at least for now. He then finds Harlan Wade in a control room, initiating a release sequence for the massive chamber. Harlan confesses that Alma died in the vault 6 days after they pulled the plug. He then opens the containment vessel, unleashing Alma's spectral adult form, who promptly kills her father. Now free, Alma turns her attention to the Point Man, who fights his way to the facility's reactor to trigger a nuclear meltdown. As the facility begins to collapse, the Point Man battles Alma's shadow creatures before experiencing a final, clear vision of his own birth. In it, Alma Wade holds him as a baby, identifying him as the first prototype, before ordering Alma to be taken back to the vault. The Point Man then escapes to the surface, just as the Project Origin facility detonates in a massive mushroom cloud, knocking him out in the blast. As he comes to, the Point Man finds himself being rescued from the blast crater by Holiday and Jin. As they fly away from the city, Jin asks, "What about Alma?" The helicopter suddenly loses power, and Alma's spectral form climbs into the cabin with them. Sometime later, a phone call is made. ATC President Genevieve Aristide assures a senator that the Origin situation is resolved, adding that the first prototype was a complete success. Meanwhile, in the wreckage of the helicopter crash, Jin's son Quan emerges, gazing upon the remains of the Auburn district. She looks over to the helicopter's pilot, Bremer, to luckily find him still alive. Not so luckily, his flesh is immediately torn from his body as a nearby Alma smiles, whose presence not only survived, but has seemingly escaped from the vault. A dazed Point Man also survives the wreck, only to be immediately confronted by the ghostly apparition of his brother, Paxton Fettel. Fettel taunts him, telling him to run as they are coming for him. The Point Man fires his rifle, but the bullets pass harmlessly through Fettel's spirit, causing him to simply laugh, feeding on his brother's hatred. Haunted by Fettel's voice, the Point Man flees through the ruins, only to be cornered by a squad of Armacham soldiers. He engages them in a brutal fight, with Fettel's spirit mockingly clapping and calling him Mother's little killing machine. As he continues, he experiences another psychic reunion, first seeing a vision of young Alma before confronting her terrifying adult form as she rises from a massive explosion. The Point Man's escape is cut short when he runs into an industrial building and is ambushed by a large ATC force, complete with a power armor unit. He's quickly pinned down by laser sights before subsequently being captured. As the ATC soldiers knock the Point Man unconscious, Fettel's spirit has the last laugh, mocking his brother's capture. As he passes out, the Point Man simply hears, "Next time, maybe you'll listen to your brother." In the explosion's aftermath, an operative reports seeing Alma climb aboard the helicopter carrying Point Man, Jin, and Holiday. All three subsequently go missing. 30 minutes earlier, a Delta Force squad, led by First Sergeant Cedric Griffin and including Sergeant Michael Beckett, is deployed to the penthouse of ATC President Genevieve Aristide. Their mission is a high-priority protective custody order for the president, but its true nature is unknown to them. In reality, Aristide is being targeted by the ATC Board of Directors, who have dispatched a separate Black Ops team, led by Colonel Richard Vanek, to dispose of her and erase all evidence. In a panic, she decides to use her contingency plan, Project Harbinger. Beckett's squad, called Dark Signal, is that contingency. He, along with Griffin, Harold Keegan, Red Jankowski, Spencer's brother, James Fox, and Manny Morales, were all secretly identified as children by the Paragon program for their latent psychic potential. Aristide's plan is to lure them to her and then to a secure hospital to begin their activation. Beckett's team, along with Lieutenant Kira Stokes, fights through Vanek's Black Ops forces, as well as psychic visions and echoes caused by Alma, to finally reach Aristide. However, as they do, the Point Man destroys the Origin reactor, and the resulting nuclear explosion flattens the area, knocking the entire squad unconscious. As Beckett fades out of consciousness, he overhears Genevieve telling her men to get them aboard. Sometime later, Beckett awakens in an Armacham hospital, strapped to a gurney. An ATC doctor named York reluctantly performs a form of surgery as Genevieve urges him on. Afterward, Beckett finds himself alone in a disheveled hospital room, quickly picking up a distress call from his fellow squadmates, Griffin and Stokes, who are also stranded inside the facility. Beckett roams the chaotic hospital searching for the others, eventually coming across Genevieve, who urges him to get to the Telesthetic Attunement Chamber, or TAC lab. She also reveals that the facility is currently under attack by Colonel Vanek, claiming that he's attempting to cover up evidence. Beckett is then contacted over comms by a mysterious ATC researcher calling himself Snake Fist, who helps guide him through the facility. Beckett eventually reaches the TAC lab, regrouping with Stokes and Genevieve, and enters the attunement chamber. However, Vanek's men soon storm the control room, forcing Stokes and Aristide to flee. Now trapped inside the chamber, Beckett is subjected to the attunement process, which greatly strengthens his psychic link to Alma and triggers a powerful vision. He's then freed by Vanek, who identifies him as part of Project Harbinger before walking away. Now separated from his team, Beckett fights to escape the underground facility and discovers a mangled Sergeant Red Jankowski being torn apart by a surgical machine. He later finds Corporal James Fox as well, who's frantically trying to warn Beckett about the baby. Suddenly, Alma herself appears and graphically rips Fox to pieces with dark tentacles. As Beckett continues his attempt to escape, he's forced to fight through ATC Black Ops soldiers and newly activated replicas, now controlled directly by Alma. More frighteningly, Alma's influence grows heavier and heavier due to the TAC experience, causing more and more hallucinations for Beckett. He soon comes across a video screen where a transmission from Vanek plays. Vanek then reveals the horrific surviving failures from Project Harbinger, now called Abominations. He also fills Beckett in on the history of Harlan Wade's Replica program. Meanwhile, the presence of Paxton Fettel remains active, vengeful against his mother, whom he now realizes never actually cared about him and only used him to set herself free. Seeing the beginnings of an apocalyptic war he's long envisioned, Fettel decides that it's time for his return, his rebirth. He then sets his sights on a specific replica soldier, designated Foxtrot 813, stating that he is the key to his plan. Foxtrot 813, meanwhile, is deployed via orbital drop to defend a command post from attacking ATC forces. He fights his way to join the rest of Foxtrot Company at Command Post Sigma, where he's ordered to use a radio to clear up a bad signal. The moment he activates it, however, he is overwhelmed by a psychic vision of Paxton Fettel, who tells him, "You're different from the others. They are meaningless now." When Foxtrot 813's vision clears, he finds himself standing over the bloody corpses of his entire squad, realizing that he's slaughtered them all. Now branded rogue by Replica Command and hunted by his own forces, Foxtrot 813 escapes the command post, guided by Fettel's voice urging him to set me free. Fettel leads him towards the epicenter of the explosion, a path that takes him through dark tunnels where he's confronted by Little Alma and her minions, creatures who Fettel dismisses as blind to whom they serve. Foxtrot 813 fights his way through waves of replica soldiers before descending into the crater's ground zero, which has become a distorted, supernatural otherworld. Fettel welcomes him as 813 fights off corrupted psychic projections of replicas. As Fettel commands him to submit, 813 approaches a glowing doorway, which leads him directly to Fettel's cell. Fettel stands and greets him, placing a hand on his shoulder and calling him my brother. Foxtrot 813 then removes his helmet, revealing his own face is now Fettel's. Fettel's physical form then dissolves as his consciousness transfers into the replica soldier, his voice declaring, "I am Reborn." Beckett, meanwhile, makes it to the surface and speaks with Stokes and Griffin before Snakefist interrupts the call. He then directs them to his location, Wade Elementary School, revealing that Aristide has also arrived there. The team is soon ambushed by replicas, and Beckett is forced to help Stokes fight her way out of a sniper trap. He then follows Griffin, who is being lured by psychic visions of a woman. Beckett and Stokes arrive just in time to see Alma, in her true form, brutally dismember First Sergeant Griffin. The survivors, Beckett, Stokes, Morales, and a clearly unstable Keegan, then retreat in their armored personnel carrier. Inside the school, Beckett and Stokes are separated by a psychic event. When they regroup, Stokes is forced to stay behind with a wounded Keegan, forcing Beckett to continue the search for Snakefist alone. Beckett then fights through more ATC forces and psychic manifestations to reach the nurse's office, which is a secret elevator to another underground lab. There, Beckett finally confronts and kills Colonel Vanek in a brutal hand-to-hand scuffle, shooting the man with his own gun. He then locates Snakefist, whose real name is Terry Halford. Halford explains that Aristide's plan is to contain Alma, something that he believes she'll fail to do. He then gives Beckett all of his data, revealing that he must travel to Still Island and use a telesthetic amplifier to destroy Alma. Before they can leave, however, a Replica assassin arrives and swiftly decapitates Halford. Beckett then gets back to the APC, where he regroups with Morales, Stokes, and Keegan. They go over Halford's data, which confirms everything he had said, while also giving them enough evidence to bury Armacham forever. Beckett also finds a message directly from Halford, who reveals what Genevieve Aristide really did to him while he was in the underground medical facility. Not only did she conduct a gene splicing operation to directly link him to Alma, but she actually tricked him into getting into the telesthenic attunement chamber to strengthen that link. Unfortunately, about 15 minutes out from Still Island, the replicas attack the APC. During the ensuing battle, Sergeant Keegan, now completely under Alma's control, wanders off. Beckett pursues the crazed man through the city's collapsing subway system and into the cargo tunnel leading to Still Island. Beckett finally arrives at the facility and reunites with Stokes and Morales, who provide cover as he enters. Beckett and Stokes then reach the amplifier chamber, but as Beckett straps into the chair, Aristide appears. She suddenly shoots Stokes before revealing her true plan: to lock Alma and Beckett inside of the chamber to use as leverage with the board to negotiate for her survival. Before she can do so, however, Alma herself appears, focused solely on Beckett. Aristide is able to reach the controls to close the chamber, and as it seals, Alma forces herself onto the trapped Beckett, initiating a physical and psychic union. Beckett is then pulled into a mindscape where he's confronted by a corrupted, monstrous version of Keegan, who screams that Alma is his. Beckett is forced to physically kill his former teammate after a warped mind-bending battle. All the while, outside, Alma... How do I put this for monetization purposes? I'm trying to run a business here, and this game has this. Alma imposes her will upon Beckett, let's use that, using her psychic link to force him to assist in her creating a third child, this one of her own choice. Beckett then awakens in the real world, inside the still-sealed amplifier. The door then opens, revealing a fiery, apocalyptic landscape. Alma stands before him, now visibly pregnant. She then takes Beckett's hand, places it on her stomach, and a child's voice whispers, "Mommy." The next year, in 2026, Point Man is currently a prisoner of Armacham forces, who are interrogating him in an attempt to learn more about Alma. Fettel's presence then appears to him, ignoring his new replica body. Sorry, 813, I guess you went through all that shit for nothing. And he assists the Point Man in taking out the ATC soldiers. Fettel then orchestrates their escape, and the pair reluctantly work together to find their mother, Alma. The brothers then steal a helicopter to escape, before being drawn back to the ruins of Fairport, a place that Fettel notes is now full of freaks and cultists following the explosion that destroyed the Origin facility. Fettel dismisses Point Man's attempts to help other survivors, calling them insignificant compared to Alma, whom he senses is calling to them. After fighting through Fairport's current inhabitants, the pair meet up with original F.E.A.R unit member Jin Sun Quan. Jin shows them a recording of Michael Beckett, the Delta Squad soldier who was forced to impregnate Alma. In it, Beckett reveals that Alma is pregnant and experiencing psychic contractions. With the birth imminent, Fettel insists that they must witness the moment, while Point Man, instead, is intent on stopping it. The brothers then track down Michael Beckett, who, due to his past experience, has been left a traumatized, empty shell. F.E.A.R psychically probes his mind to reveal the horrifying truth of Beckett's past with Project Harbinger to the Point Man. F.E.A.R realizes that Beckett is the one who impregnated Alma, making him the father of their unborn brother. Unfortunately, this psychological experience causes Beckett to spontaneously combust, violently putting him out of his misery. This revelation causes F.E.A.R to see their past in a new light, declaring that their mother was never the enemy, but merely a conduit for his evil, referring to their father and grandfather, Harlan Wade. To reach Alma, they must first confront the monster of their past. They travel to a facility from their childhood, where they're psychically confronted by the memory of Harlan Wade, who calls his children monsters. They destroy this psychic manifestation, clearing their path to Alma. However, as Alma's childbirth begins, the brothers have their final confrontation. F.E.A.R pleads with Point Man to stand together and think about things as a family, urging him to choose between his brother or the orders of a woman. If Point Man fights and destroys F.E.A.R's spirit, shooting him in the head 3 times before his form explodes, he proceeds to Alma's side as she gives birth. Unfortunately for the Point Man, he arrives too late, as he sees his new brother before him. Alma's spirit then disappears for good, as the Point Man receives a transmission from Jin, thanking him for all he's done and declaring that everything seems normal. He then walks away, carrying the baby in his arms, out of the facility. If Point Man instead sides with F.E.A.R, why do I keep saying F.E.A.R? If Point Man instead sides with F.E.A.R, F.E.A.R's spirit possesses his body. Now in control of his brother, he approaches Alma, delivers the baby himself, and holds his newborn brother. He promises to raise the baby as his own, shaping him as his servant. He then looks over to his mother, telling her that she has something he needs. He then suddenly attacks her, mauling Alma and finally bringing an end to her once and for all. This brings us to the end of the F.E.A.R story, at least how Monolith Productions intended. As mentioned in the intro, there's still 2 more stories to tell. These stories, told by Timegate Studios, pick up directly after the first game's ending. So, pretend we're back at that point in this video, just as the helicopter takes off from the explosion of the Project Origin facility. The Point Man, Jin Sun Quan, and Douglas Holliday are in said helicopter when suddenly Alma appears. The helicopter's power then fails, and it crashes into a building. The Point Man awakens at the crash site, separated from Jin and Holliday. After he finds a way out of the building, he enters a church where he's surprisingly confronted by the presence of the very man he had just killed, his brother, Paxton F.E.A.R. F.E.A.R, amused by his own death, uses his new power to reactivate the entire Replica army, which is now again under his psychic control. The Point Man fights his way out, battling the newly awakened replicas. However, Holliday soon radios in, reporting that Jin had been captured by the Replica forces. The Point Man then reunites with Holliday, and the pair learn that the remaining Delta forces are setting up an extraction point at Auburn Memorial Hospital. Jin then radios in, revealing that she was able to escape her captors and is now also en route to the hospital. As they proceed, Point Man and Holliday are separated by a structural collapse. They reunite in a warehouse later, only to be ambushed by psychic apparitions. Holliday, who can also see the ghosts, is soon overwhelmed. He's grabbed, dragged into a dark room, and brutally torn to pieces. His last words being, "Find Jin." Now alone, the Point Man continues towards the hospital, following the subway system. He's hunted by replicas, crawlers, and assassins, all while being taunted by F.E.A.R's spirit. He has visions of F.E.A.R confronting Jin, and also sees a bloody apparition of Spen Jankowski. He even briefly encounters a surviving Norton Mapes, who cowers and locks himself in a newsstand rather than help. After fighting his way through a parking garage full of power armor, the Point Man finally crosses the sky bridge to Auburn Memorial. There, he follows a trail of blood and unfortunately discovers the mutilated body of Jin Sun Quan, who was killed before she could reach safety. 3 apparitions stand above her body before quickly vanishing. With his entire team now dead, the Point Man is contacted by F.E.A.R coordinator Betters, who has tracked his signal and is sending an extraction chopper to the hospital roof. The point man then fights his way through the haunted hospital, which is now a hive of psychic manifestations and powerful replicas. When he reaches the roof, F.E.A.R's presence greets him, telling him that he should know better by now. The point man is then forced to fight off a final wave of replicas as the Black Hawk lands. Just as he runs for the helicopter, however, a massive explosion suddenly destroys it, knocking him unconscious. Sometime later, he awakens to walk toward a fiery doorway. F.E.A.R speaks to him, declaring that Alma's sins have planted the seeds of their doom, and that we will make them remember. They will die, all of them. The point man, now completely stranded and alone, then looks over the burning, war-torn apocalypse that F.E.A.R dreamed of. Going back in the story once again to the point man's original mission, we find an unnamed F.E.A.R sergeant. This sergeant, alongside Captain D. Rains and Lieutenant S. Chen, is part of a second team deployed to the Origin facility after the ATC security guards began their assault on F.E.A.R and Delta Force. Their mission, assigned by Coordinator Betters, is to investigate the ATC's Project Perseus. Upon landing, the team immediately finds themselves caught in a firefight between the activated Replica soldiers and the Delta Force units. They're quickly separated by an explosion, and the sergeant is forced to fight his way through sewers and city ruins. On his way, he begins to experience psychic visions, including a disturbing one featuring Lieutenant Chen being dragged into the floor by an unknown entity. He battles not only replicas, but also ATC security forces and mysterious cloaked assassins. Eventually, the sergeant reunites with Rains and Chen at the ATC data center, which is now under attack by a third faction, highly skilled mercenaries later identified as Nightcrawlers. The team discovers the Nightcrawlers are led by a man named Gavin Morrison, who is working with an albino commander to retrieve data related to Perseus and the Synchronicity events. While Rains and Chen escort surviving Delta Force soldiers, the sergeant delves deeper, battling Nightcrawlers and encountering paranormal events, including visions of Alma and Paxton F.E.A.R. He's soon blown out of a window during a confrontation with Alma, but is luckily rescued by Rains and Chen. Their objective soon becomes Armacham Plaza, where ATC and replicas are now fighting. The sergeant is assigned to secure the bioresearch facility while Chen goes to the corporate archives. Inside bioresearch, the sergeant learns the Nightcrawlers are after the source, genetic material from Paxton F.E.A.R. He overhears Morrison discussing the mission with the albino commander, and pursues Morrison, who flees the facility just as the Origin facility explodes in the distance. The shockwave then hits, knocking everyone down. Later, the sergeant awakens underground with Chen, but they find that Rains is now missing. They pursue Morrison through the ruined subterranean levels, battling terrifying shadow creatures and experiencing more intense psychic phenomena. Unfortunately, Chen soon meets a gruesome end, pulled apart by one of the shadow creatures after stepping on its hole. The sergeant continues alone, eventually finding Morrison betrayed and captured by Nightcrawlers. He soon learns Morrison was working for the mysterious senator that ATC President Genevieve Aristide secretly spoke with, and was tasked with retrieving Alma's DNA, which was the true objective of the Perseus mandate. In exchange for his safety, Morrison agrees to lead the sergeant to the DNA sample's location, an old decommissioned ATC cloning facility hidden under an island mine. En route through the supply tunnels, however, the pair encounter Paxton F.E.A.R's presence. A psychic attack triggered by Alma then kills Morrison by crushing him with a truck. The sergeant then proceeds alone into the Labyrinthian cloning facility, fighting Nightcrawlers and experiencing disturbing visions related to F.E.A.R's past and Alma's suffering. He finally reaches the vault just as the albino commander retrieves the DNA canister. The sergeant pursues the commander, destroying Nightcrawler mini-turrets and fighting replica forces who have also infiltrated the facility. In a final showdown in a loading bay, the sergeant battles waves of Nightcrawlers and elites, before finally confronting and subsequently killing the albino commander. He then secures the DNA canister containing Alma's genetic material before reuniting with Captain Rains on the surface. The pair are then able to escape in a Delta Force helicopter. On board, Rains suggests the sergeant might become the team's new lieutenant, as Chen would have wanted. As he speaks, the sergeant sees a ghostly image of Chen sitting opposite him, which then dissolves into black ash. Sometime later, a Nightcrawler delivers the recovered fetal DNA canister to a man in a suit, implied to be the senator, confirming the mission's partial success despite Morrison's death and the F.E.A.R team's interference. Paxton Fettle's presence, however, still lingers on. And that brings us to the end of the F.E.A.R storyline. Both of them. Whether you follow Monolith's official trilogy or Timegate's alternate path, the result is the same. A haunting descent into humanity's obsession with power, control, and the ghosts that it creates. Despite its unsettling themes, F.E.A.R remains one of the most distinctive horror shooters of its era. A mix of cinematic firefights, psychological terror, and a tragic family curse that refuses to die. Even after 20 years, Alma Wade still casts a long shadow. And somewhere out there, she's probably still watching. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more full franchise recaps just like this one, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what's next. Make sure you leave a like to help me out with this crazy algorithm, and most importantly, leave a comment to let me know what you'd like to see me cover next. If you'd like to help support this channel directly, you can also join as a member here on YouTube or support me on Patreon, where you'll get your name in the credits, early access to upcoming videos, and you get to feed these cute little kitties. I put them on screen every video now because I just love them so damn much. Another huge thanks to longtime friend of the show, Craydon, for capturing this footage for me so I could get a Halloween episode out in this crazy busy month. Thank you, buddy. Love you so much. As always, thank you all for watching, and until next time, I've been Suggestive Gaming, and now you're in the know.